views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to journalists, we talk to writers, we talk to photographers, we talk to editors, we talk to filmmakers, videographers, really anybody putting stuff out in the Bronx. The whole idea is to give you insight as to who they are and what they're writing about, and what they're thinking about. So when you read something or you watch something, you could say, oh, I saw that person on the Bronx Buzz, and you know more about it. This evening we are thrilled. We have two really interesting people, really talented people. We're going to start with a journalist, and then we're going to move to a former journalist who's now a photographer. But right now, let's go over to the city and say hello to Rachel Holliday Smith. Hi, Rachel. Nice to have you with us.
Great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Let's talk a little bit. I mean, the city, people know it. People get it in their email every day. It's a digital newspaper, as it were. But talk a little bit about you and your background. When did you get into journalism? What made you say, this is what I want to do? Give us a little background.
Sure. So I've been covering the local news for about a decade now. I actually started at New York One, Channel 1, the beloved local news station. I was working behind the scenes there. Never intended to be in TV or working in TV, but that gave me the bug for local news and covering New York. It was a great place to learn about how the city functioned. And then I went into writing, doing a neighborhood beat in Brooklyn for DNA Info, the news website that is no longer in operation. Covered Crown Heights, learned how to cover a neighborhood, went to a lot of community board meetings, got to know a lot of controversies around zoning and development and gentrification. And then I went to WNYC briefly, worked on a lot of local issues there, worked on the Brian Lehrer show briefly. And then I came here, which is the city.nyc, which is a nonprofit news website. We do not have a newspaper. We do not print anything, but we consider ourselves to be a newspaper online. So we cover the 5 boroughs.
And what was that little germ of the idea or the inspiration that made you say, you know what, I like this, I'm going to keep doing this? Because all the things that you mentioned are, really important New York City media, but something you mentioned in there that you got the bug. What was that bug? What motivates you every day?
It really was the fact that New York City, when you work in local news in New York City, your stories can really resonate beyond the city, nationally, internationally even. The things that happen here just have this resonance elsewhere. And you're never bored. I'll be blunt, it's a little selfish. I'm just never bored in my job because New York City is like getting a story here, finding a story is like shooting fish in a barrel. There's just so much going on. And I'll also say fewer and fewer people doing local news. The industry is a bit in flux. So it's just very fertile ground for a local reporter, and I just love covering the craziness.
In many ways, you and I are on the same page. Of course, I don't do exactly what you do, but motivated by the same thing. I mean, I feel like sometimes I can just walk into the local pharmacy and I got a news story. There's probably 10 news stories there. You got healthcare, you got the price of drugs, and you have the people who are in there, and each one has a story. Well, let's talk about a very big story, actually, and it affects a lot of people. And this whole idea of RAD, the Rental Assistance Program, and now it looks like through this program there will be some privatization for the long-suffering residents of NYCHA. Why don't you explain what it is and where are we going with this potentially?
Sure. So folks watching may have heard of this, or are NYCHA residents who actually have heard that this might happen in their complex. But basically, for folks who don't know, it's a lot of acronyms, but it boils down to private managers are going to come in to operate and manage thousands of units within NYCHA. Some of the units that are going to go through this have been, put out there already, but not all of them. Right now, about 1/10 of NYCHA complexes will be under private management by the end of this year. It'll be about a third of all of NYCHA units will be under private management when they are done. That's what the city has said. That's their goal. So it essentially means that for-profit or nonprofit private developers and managers will come in to renovate NYCHA apartments and manage them.
So let's do the good news, bad news. The good news is NYCHA residents have been suffering with unacceptable, intolerable conditions of every sort, whether it be bugs and rodents, whether it be mold, whether it be bad, no heat, bad piping. I mean, ceilings collapsing. We could just go, even security issues. We can go through all of that. So you say, well, wait a minute. The city has demonstrated with its actions over generations that it can't manage this, so you bring in somebody else. On the other hand, that public control is allegedly what keeps the price down. There's many concerns about privatizing public entities. Is this a good way to go? Do you want to give me an evaluation, or at least what you hear from people? Kind of put this in context for us.
Definitely. So it is definitely a form of privatization. There's no getting around that, but it's important for people to know that the land and essentially the buildings and the operation are under a lease. So NYCHA will actually retain ownership of the buildings where this is happening. So I just want to put that out there. NYCHA is not losing permanently these complexes, but people really worry. It's like, I'm going to have a private landlord instead of a public one. What does that mean? There's a lot of questions around that. On the other hand, a lot of folks who otherwise would philosophically be against this are saying this is absolutely what we need to do to fix the problems in NYCHA right now. There is simply not enough money to fix the many problems that NYCHA has. There's a $40 billion with a B deficit right now for the capital repairs at NYCHA. So, the folks who are organizing around this, many of them housing advocates, say this is the only way practically right now to move ahead with fixing NYCHA apartments.
Right, because if you're saying, Mayor de Blasio in New York City, please come in and redo the piping in our buildings, that's not, we've been trying this for years. That's not happening.
There's just not money for it. And certainly there are folks who would say, RAD, this program that they've come up with to get the money is just not good enough. We need to keep pushing for federal funding to keep public housing completely public. Let's say no to private managers. But there are many people who would, in an ideal world, agree with that worldview, but they just know practically that they're not going to get saved by the federal government or city funds. They've got to bring in private managers.
Certainly talking about federal funding right now and under the current political climate, that is not likely to happen. Sounds to me, and I don't know if you want to venture into this, but it sounds to me like you're leaning a little bit and saying, you know what, maybe this is a good thing. And, if you wait for federal funding, you're going to have 3 more years at least of no heat in your apartment. So why not try to do something drastic now?
Right. I can't weigh in on it because I just report on it, but I will say that most of the folks I've spoken to who are really familiar with this process and who've written a handbook about what will happen under RAD with residents, they say this is the only way we see forward right now. I will also say that there are serious fears grounded in reality that if nothing's done quickly, the apartments, the buildings will actually fall into such disrepair that they will not be usable. So it's like, do we take some private management with public ownership right now, or do we wait for something better and then the buildings fall into disrepair?
Yep. I totally understand it, and we'll watch and see how it goes. The one of the X factors, and then I want to move on to something else. One of the X factors is that you really hope that these private companies have the ability to do this work within the budgets that they say. And if all of a sudden they show up and say, you know what, we can't do this because it needs an overhaul, it needs this, then we're almost back to square one. Anyway. Go ahead, finish up.
It's also not a theoretical conversation anymore because these buildings are being converted now. And by the end of this year, it's sort of already going on. So as a journalist, I'm concerned with answering people's questions who live in these complexes and trying to get some of the fears allayed. But we'll see what happens. There's a lot of things.
One thing I neglected to ask, do you know of which complexes, which NYCHA projects in the Bronx might be affected or are being affected?
Off the top, actually, there are many. I know the big one that's going on right now is Betances.
Got it. We only have a couple of moments, and I want to just, you wrote a fascinating story about community boards reflecting the communities that they serve. And basically, the analysis was the composition of the community boards don't reflect the composition of the population within the community boards. We only got about 2 minutes. Talk to me just briefly about what your thoughts are. This is problematic because we want representation, right?
Yes. Yes, definitely. What we found is that generally citywide, the community boards skew older. In Manhattan, we found that, and I cover Manhattan specifically, they are often more filled with homeowners than renters. We're seeing that in Manhattan, Hispanic people are underrepresented. So this comes from demographic data about community board members that was put out for the first time based on the 2018 charter revisions. I don't know if people remember that term limits were implemented for community boards. So it's new change. We can see what they look like now. And in many ways, they don't reflect the neighborhoods that they represent.
Right. Rachel, is there a silver bullet here? Does it mean, because we got to run, but just the last thoughts on it? We need to relook at the rules. We need to urge borough presidents to handle it differently. What's your silver bullet here?
I would say for people who are interested in applying, just really consider applying. More people need to apply to community boards.
Well, that'll do it. Yep. Rachel Holliday Smith, say hello to SA and all our friends over there at the city. I can't thank you enough for being with us. And guess what? We're going to ask you back because there's more going on that we want to hear about.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. There she is, Rachel Holliday Smith from the city. And guess what? We're going to take a break. And when we come back, some unbelievable photographs that you are really going to enjoy. Don't go away.
Did you know that brain and spinal cord tumors are the deadliest form of pediatric cancer? It can happen to anyone.
I'm not hungry. My tummy hurts.
You can help us be part of the solution.
Get in here. Hurry.
You can be part of our family.
It's okay.
Please support our mission today. Making Headway Foundation. dedicated to the care, comfort, and cure of children with brain and spinal cord tumors.
Hey, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and I led up the whole anticipation for this evening's second guest. It's my longtime friend, Bob Kappstatter. Nice to have you with us.
As always.
And as many people in the Bronx know, Cappy has been a wonderful journalist, print journalist for many years covering the Bronx. And now, if you talk to him, he is a photographer.
Well, among other things.
Among your many things, I know that. But you really have taken to becoming a photographer. Talk to me about that transition and what attracts you with the visual representation.
Well, you know, when you're a journalist, you are an observer. You look for details, telling details. Well, I think it transfers fairly easily to photography. I've always loved photography. As I've said on previous shows, I did a double major in journalism with reporting and photography.
So you're talking about in college?
In college, yes. And then
So
I
what
found,
was that?
And then I found out cameras are heavier than a pad and pen. I said,
oh, that was
so
it. That's right. I remember you telling me that.
But I've always been into photography. But lately, I have. When I was working for Senator Louis Sepulveda, I would go around with his community stuff, shooting official photos, and I said, "Whoa, wait a minute! There's some other good personal photos out of this event here."
Do you use like fancy equipment, or you just pull out the old cell phone?
Depends on the occasion. I've got my heavy guns and I've got my cell phone.
How heavy are those?
A couple of Nikons.
A couple of Nikons with different lenses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting.
One telephoto, one regular.
I
Anyway,
want to get to the point because
stuff.
the reason we invited you is I saw over time your trip to Cuba, and the photographs are just unbelievable. So just
Cuba is unbelievable
talk
for a
about
photographer.
the background, and then we're going to show some pictures. Folks are going to love it.
Well, I was down in Cuba about a little over a year ago because I covered the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I saw East Berlin before McDonald's and Toyota came in. So I thought, I want to go down to Havana.
They've already put one of the photos on the screen, so go ahead.
All right.
There we go.
I'm not seeing it on this one.
Well,
there we go. Okay.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to see Cuba before it opened up, and apparently it is shut down thanks to our current president. So I don't see it improving in the near future. It's a poor country.
But
it's a
being
very poor country.
Let's use this as an example. I mean,
there we go.
There's regular people, right? There's people just living lives as best as they can.
I have to tell you, the Cuban people are amazing. They're wonderful. They're friendly. They live in scratched dirt, poor conditions down there, but they live life well. They're friendly and they accept their situation. They overcome it as best they can.
This photograph with almost the overseeing the people. I mean, there's something ominous about that, and something somewhat accurate.
And you know
about
what? All of these wall murals with Castro. Well, Castro didn't want any wall murals left up. Che said, "Yes, do all me on the wall murals." But
until you got the best of them in that one.
But the paint is fading and chipping on all of these. It's fading out.
But which adds to the accuracy of the photograph.
Yeah, past moments, faded glory, if there was ever glory to begin with down there.
And you were there for how long?
I did 10 days this time, 7 days the last time.
And what you told me is you went alone, literally, to take photographs.
Solo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's show another one. Let's do.
Moving.
Numero dos.
Boom. This is one of my favorites. This guy was sitting there smoking his Cuban cigar. Yes, I brought back several cigars. And this kid in a school uniform just comes tripping by. You can see the conditions of the sidewalks and the street and so forth. The infrastructure is crumbling. It is in really bad shape.
Now, when you're in this circumstance, do you stand there and wait for the moment, or do you have to be real quick so
it's a combination. Sometimes you have to have your camera at the ready. I've stood for 40 minutes because there's been a wall or a scene that I want to get one person walking through, so it's not just a blank.
So So
screen.
the impatient print reporter learned patience through photography.
Well,
That's
investigative reporting is patience too. So
nice. Listen, I'm going to tell a really quick anecdote.
Go.
We were at a political event,
Yeah.
and I saw a very interesting, I don't want to say who it was, I'll tell you off camera,
Okay.
a very interesting interaction between two politicians, and you grabbed me and said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "I did." And you literally pulled me into the other room and said, "I want to know what happened, and I want to know right now." So that's
Yes.
the patience that you did not have as a print reporter.
there you go. All right.
All right, who's this guy?
Okay, this is, it's funny. You see a lot of these flag shirts, U.S. flag clothing there. This is their little sort of protest form.
Wow.
And, there's the police don't care. There's a subtle saying, come on, United States, we really like you.
Be cool.
We don't like our situation.
He's wearing a Florida hat.
Of course. And of course, they have a lot of relatives in Miami and in the States.
And there is a certain inner joy and happiness that pops
But
out.
I
here.
also have to say that where there is a little rebellion, the current graffiti, favorite graffiti down there is the Orwellian.
Really?
You'll see written on the walls, 2 + 2 = 5.
No, why?
That's from George Orwell's
Oh,
1984.
There you go. Well,
Yes, we don't believe your propaganda, government.
that's right. All right.
All right.
Next, and then
Okay, this is the Malecon, the seawall. Runs for a long length. This is
In
where
what city?
people in Havana, and this is where people hang out. All kinds of people, tourists, locals, prostitutes. It's a prostitute stretch too. It's just the gathering place for everybody in the city.
wow,
And
it looks lovely. Is
some
it as
places
nice
you
as
don't
it
want to
looks?
walk too close to the wall because you will get drenched when the waves come over.
Is it really as lovely as it looks in this photo?
It is,
Wow.
yes. And you can see how the condition of a lot of these buildings are bad shape.
Oh,
There we
speaking
go.
of bad shape, this
Well,
is
good
lovely
shape. This is a place for lovers also.
And this is along that same
And
stretch?
that's along the Malecon, yes.
A couple of bottles of wine to
There
the
we
left.
go, all set to party hardy.
And what is that behind them? It's
That
almost like
is
a prison.
the castle,
it's a castle.
El Moro.
El Moro. Now, did were people annoyed at you for taking this is
Well,
a
some
personal
people
moment.
that don't. Well, I'm using a long lens. I seize the moment. Or some people, you smile and you say, "Oh, that's a great app. Can I take a picture?" And they smile back. Sure.
Like that gentleman.
But you know
that we
what?
just saw.
It's better if you grab the picture without them seeing you first, because that's the natural shot you want. Other times they'll smile for the camera.
How many pictures did you take while you were there?
Oh, 1,000 would be
1,000.
1,000 would be conservative.
Wow.
That's why you saw me posting on Facebook over like 2 weeks. That's how long it took me to get through editing and
And that's
narrowing
why I
these
said we
photos
got to
down.
have you on the show. All right, let's
So-
see more. More.
Okay, this is Tanks for the Memories.
Oh, that's funny.
This is outside the Museum of the Revolution, and from Russian tanks back in the old days to tourist taxis where people rent these taxis out
that's
to
a
drive
taxi?
around. These are all taxis. They're all cars stopped in the 50s. This is back to the 50s down there. Car collectors would go nuts if this island ever opened up. There are so many cars. They're all from the 50s, and they've been restored. A lot of them have Russian engines and run on diesel fuel. The air is a little acrid.
Wow.
But
you should send that to Bruce Springsteen to go with his song Pink Cadillac. I love
there
it.
you go.
There you-
Except this was,
And this is
I think that was I can't tell the car
the
plate.
kind
what
of
it
car.
was. Yeah.
This is the kind of photograph you'd have to wait for because clearly you were
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to get it to look like the
Yeah.
tank was on top of them.
Oh yeah, I waited. I waited. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of traveling alone,
yeah.
and you're there to
That's
take
it. That's the freedom that it gives
Beautiful.
you, and sorry about losing the companionship and little romance maybe.
Whatever. Keep going. All right.
All right.
Next.
Oh, this is my kid. This is just a kid on the street. I saw him do this once, and I said, Otra vez, do it again.
Did you get lucky to get that staircase banister right positioned where it was, or did you skillfully?
No, you know
maneuver
what?
that?
I have a second. This is the shot I didn't want used because it's a little. The positioning is a little
Suggestive. Yes.
Yeah, I have a second shot where it's not quite the same angle, but the kid did it once, and I said, "Otra vez, por favor." He said, "Oh, again, please," and he did it.
Wow.
Boom.
And there you go.
Just a great street shot.
Tremendous. All right.
Oh, this is just. I don't know if she's looking at a photo and reacting to a photo or what, but.
There is something incredibly dramatic about these very human-looking people in the
That's-
context of
That's what
roads
that's-
that are falling
yeah.
apart, buildings that are falling
Yeah,
apart, and
yeah.
yet they seem to have great humanity.
This
frankly.
is their life, and they live it as fully as they can. And I have to say something about she's talking on a cell phone, but
Right.
the internet, it's very difficult to get on the
Oh.
internet down there. You have to buy an internet card at a local government store for like $5 for an hour. I don't know. But the government is scared silly of people getting on the internet.
And so if you do it through them, then they know who's on the internet.
Well, no, that's not the
Oh,
point.
no?
The
Okay.
point is the people see how the rest of the world is doing, how the other half
that's why
is
they don't
living.
want-
And this was one of the reasons the Berlin Wall came down.
Let's show more before we
All
run
right.
out of time.
And very quickly, and hold on to that, the wall came down because people in East Berlin were seeing how the people in West
Right.
Berlin were living on TV, on their TVs. All right, this is a little fishing village down in the Espiritu Santo region, south central area. I wanted to find myself, blame Hemingway, I wanted to find a little fishing village.
And you did.
I researched like crazy, and I found this place, La Boca. It's called The Mouth, La Boca, where the river empties into the sea under the shadow of the Escambray Mountains in the background. And these fishermen go out at just before sunset in their small boats.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We got time for one more photo.
All right, then let's go.
Let's go for one more photo, and I
Okay.
want to ask you a question. And that's a perfect photo.
And
So
that's Santos the fisherman. Just
I saw on Facebook, we're going to be entering a portrait contest.
yeah, what
This
the hell?
is the kind of photo that you
Yeah,
should.
I threw him in the contest. Yeah.
My goodness, the portraits are just
just-
extraordinary.
Well, there you go.
And so you went over to him and said, "Hey, can I take your photo?"
I started talking to him. Amazingly, I remembered a lot of my high school and college Spanish. Even more so, my last wife was Puerto Rican, so I had to speak to the grandmas and the aunts. So I was able to hold a conversation and
Cappy, these are
Talk to
just incredible photographs. I don't know
thank
where
you.
you're going next, maybe to Brooklyn or maybe come back to the Bronx.
well, you want to talk exotic? I'm going to
Go to
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn?
Yeah.
All right, you got big travel days. Anyway, just tremendous.
you.
Good luck with the
Thank you.
portrait contest. And that's it for the Bronx Buzz for tonight.
Whoa.
That's it.
Okay.
So we will, I don't know where we're going to be over here. We'll see you next week. Good night. This week on the Bronx Talk, we're going to be doing date rape. And the week after, we're going to talk about the Jerome Park Reservoir.
Whoa.
See you next week.
Topics.
Good night.